I became a corrections officer at Millhaven Federal Penitentiary the summer I turned 24. Fresh out of training, work in the graveyard shift because no one with seniority wanted it. Just me, the fluorescent hum, and the count. You get so good at it that you stop thinking. You just walk and look and mark your clipboard. When I found the 64th, it smelled like old paint and industrial bleach that never fully covered something else underneath. It was cold that night, colder than usual. I finished cell 63, marked my clipboard, started walking back toward the tier gate. I don't know what made me look back. I turned around. There was a door at the end of the hallway. It wasn't there before. I told myself I miscounted. I told myself the low light was playing tricks. The light above the door wasn't flickering. It was perfectly still. The slot was open. The cell was dark. Not dim. Dark. The kind of dark that feels thick. You missed me last time. I've been watching you get better at the count. You're much faster than Officer Reeves was. I pressed the button. The radio was dead. I heard the inspection slot slide shut. Just that sound. I ran. I will not pretend otherwise. I grabbed the desk to stop myself and knocked my clipboard to the floor. The clipboard landed face up. Every single row, in my own handwriting, read C-64, occupied. 2 other guards came when I finally got the radio working. Solid wall at the end. They looked at me the way people look when they've decided you're tired or frightened or both. I asked them to check my clipboard. It read 63, in my handwriting, clean and unbroken as it had ever been. Millhaven was built in 1972. The original C-tier design included 64 cells. Cell 64 was sealed and written off the official records in 1989, following an incident they classified as a structural assessment failure. He put in for psychiatric leave in November of 1988. He never came back to work. The word empty was crossed out in red pen, in a different handwriting. And underneath it, someone had written, "Confirm again." That was 6 years ago. I don't work nights anymore. But sometimes, when I'm doing the count on day shift, I catch myself marking 64 before I can stop. I always cross it out, and I always look at the end of the hall before I walk away. I worked corrections for 11 years, 8 of them at Beaumont unit in Texas. If you've worked max security, you understand what it means when I say you stop flinching. Everything becomes procedure. Violence becomes paperwork. After a while, you stop being scared of the men, and you start being scared of the building. Block D is where they put the long-stay solitary inmates. Men who'd hurt other men badly enough that even general population couldn't hold them. The cells ran along a single corridor. No natural light, no communal space. One guard walking the corridor on every shift, checking vitals, delivering trays. I volunteered for Block D in my 3rd year. The extra pay was good. My daughter had just started college. Block D smelled like nothing, like the absence of air. The ventilation system in that wing was old and the air barely moved. The temperature sat at a constant 61 degrees, no matter what month it was. Guards wore their jackets in summer. The lights were solid white, no flicker. They ran 24 hours without dimming because the admin decided it was safer. Men in solitary lost track of day and night within weeks. The lights didn't help with that. You could tell how long a man had been in D block by whether he could look directly at the lights or not. The long stay men couldn't. They stayed on their bunks with their faces turned away. Cell 12 in Block D had been empty for 3 months when I noticed the sound. A low clicking, rhythmic, like someone running a thumbnail along the metal bed frame over and over. I heard it on Tuesday. I told myself it was the ventilation system. That corridor had strange acoustics. I heard it again on Thursday. I stopped outside cell 12 and listened. Click, 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 evenly spaced, patient. The way you tap your fingers waiting for something. I looked through the slot. The cell was empty, bunk made, tray shelf clear. I stood there for 40 seconds, and the clicking stopped the moment I looked in, and started again the moment I stepped back. I started timing my rounds to pass cell 12 at different intervals. I told myself I was being professional, ruling out a mechanical issue. The clicking was there on every pass after midnight, and never before midnight. On the 4th week, I heard it before I reached the cell. I was still 8 doors away when I heard it start up. Steady, getting slightly louder the closer I got. I stopped walking. The clicking continued. Same pace, I took 1 step backward. The clicking sped up just slightly. I took another step back. It sped up again. I stepped forward. The clicking slowed back to its original rhythm. It knew where I was. I called in a facility check. Maintenance found nothing. Warden wrote it up as acoustical anomaly. Old building, movement in walls, not unusual in D block. He told me the previous guard on D block had filed the same report 3 months before he transferred out. I asked where that guard transferred to. Nobody would tell me. The next Tuesday night, I was doing my midnight pass, and I heard it start up at the far end of the corridor as usual. I stopped at cell 12. I reached out and put my hand flat against the door. Clicking stopped. Something on the other side of the door put its hand against the exact same spot. I felt the pressure through the metal, flat, steady, 5 distinct points of contact. The temperature in the hallway dropped fast. I could see my breath. Something slid through the inspection slot. Slowly, deliberately. It was a folded piece of paper. I didn't touch it. I backed away from the door, and I didn't stop until I hit the far wall. From across the corridor, I could read what was written on it. My full name. And below it, my daughter's college address. I called for backup. When 2 guards came, I made them open cell 12. Empty. The bunk was made. The tray shelf was clear. No paper on the floor of the corridor. It was gone, though I know I didn't move it. The duty sergeant told me I was exhausted and needed to take my break. I put in my transfer request the next morning. I was gone from Beaumont in 3 weeks. A year later, I found a corrections officer forum online. A thread titled D Block Beaumont. Anyone else? The most recent post was from a guard who'd worked there in 2019. He described the clicking. He described the temperature drop. He described putting his hand on the door. He posted one detail I hadn't told anyone. He said whatever was on the other side of the door pressed back harder when he tried to pull away, like it didn't want to let go. I went back through the thread. 12 different officers over 15 years. Some described the clicking. Some described the cold. All 12 described cell 12 specifically. I searched inmate records for that cell. The last occupant was a man named Carver, who died in cell 12 in 2003. Natural causes, The record said, I requested the full incident file. It took 4 months and a freedom of information request. The incident file noted that at the time of discovery, the cell was locked from the inside. No mechanism existed for the door to be locked from the inside. That was 4 years ago. I work a county facility now. Single story, no solitary wing. 'Cause some nights I lie awake and think about the weight of that hand through the door. That flat, patient pressure. And I think about how it let me go. And I wonder if it let all of us go. Or just if it wasn't done yet. My father was a prison guard. His father before him. I became one because it was the only job I could imagine that felt serious enough to matter. I worked Greystone Correctional for 17 years. I was 26 when I started. I was 43 when I found the room. My job that week was inventory. Every 5 years, the facility did a full structural walkthrough. My supervisor handed me a flashlight, a clipboard, and the 1961 original blueprint. On the blueprint, between the East Wing laundry room and the maintenance shaft, there was a room marked simply, Records, Admin. I had worked at Greystone for 17 years. I had never seen that room. The east corridor smelled like mildew and old rubber. The laundry room was to my left, its machines silent on a Tuesday afternoon. I stood between it and the maintenance shaft door and looked at the wall in front of me. Painted cinder block, same as everywhere else. But the blueprint said there was 8 feet of space between where I was standing and where the shaft began. I knocked on the wall. Hollow. Unmistakably hollow. I found the seam on my 3rd pass with the flashlight. Someone had painted over the door frame so many times that it was almost invisible, but the seam was there, a perfect rectangle. And at the bottom right, barely visible under 40 years of gray paint, the outline of a handle. The door opened inward. The air that came out was cold and dry, which made no sense. Sealed rooms in old buildings are damp. This was like opening a refrigerator. The room was small, for maybe 12 feet by 10. No windows. A single uncovered light bulb in the ceiling that came on when I found the switch. A pull chain. The bulb was new. Newer than everything else in the room by decades. I told myself someone from maintenance had been in here recently. I stepped inside. The walls were covered floor to ceiling in handwritten notes.
Names and numbers. Dates going back to 1963.
Inmate
names paired with dates and a notation.
I didn't understand at first.
A single letter. T or
B,
N or
N,
W.
Or W. In the center of the room was a wooden desk. On the desk was a ledger, bound in cloth, the cover worn smooth. I opened it, or the handwriting changed every few years. Different wardens, I realized. A chain of custody going back 40 years. Some of the notes were clinical, some were stranger. He knew before we told him. He was already packed. I flipped to the final entry. The ink was still slightly darker than the rest. Recent, weeks maybe. The entry was for a man named Delray Cousins. Cell 9, East Wing. Date of note, March 3rd. His notation at the end read, first one in 11 years to come back and ask questions. Do not engage. Watch only. Delray Cousins had been released from Greystone East Wing in February. He'd been out for 3 weeks before that entry was written. Someone had written about a free man in a locked hidden room inside the prison that supposedly no one knew existed. I looked up from the ledger. The pull chain for the light was swaying. Not much, just slightly, as if someone had just let go of it. The door behind me was closed. I did not close it. I turned around very slowly. The room was empty, but there was a second ledger on the desk that hadn't been there when I sat down. Smaller, thinner. I didn't touch it for a long time. When I finally picked it up and opened the cover, there was only one entry inside. Just a date. Today's date, that Tuesday in March. And a notation. 17 years. T. I got out of that room. I reported the room to my supervisor. I submitted the ledger as a found artifact per facility protocol. The structural team sealed the room the next morning. No investigation was opened. My supervisor told me hidden utility spaces were common in facilities that old. He said this looking at his desk, not at me. The ledger I found was logged as non-material administrative document and filed. I asked to see it 2 weeks later. Facilities said they had no record of receiving it. I found Delray Cousins through a community re-entry organization 6 months after I left Greystone. I told him I was a researcher. I asked if he'd be willing to talk about his time there. He agreed. We met at a diner in town. He was quiet, careful. About 20 minutes into the conversation, he stopped and looked at me directly and said, "You found the room, didn't you?" I didn't answer. He nodded like I had. He told me the room had been a warden's project, a long-running one. Certain inmates, the ones marked T in the ledger, were what he called the ones they watched closely. He said every inmate in Greystone knew about the room, but nobody talked about it, because the men who talked about it were always the ones who got transferred. He leaned across the table. He said, "The letter by your name, in the second ledger." "What was it?" I told him. "T." He stood up and left without touching his food. He didn't look back. I tried to contact him twice after that. His phone was disconnected both times. I retired from corrections 8 months ago. I tell myself it was time. Some mornings I believe that. But sometimes I sit at my kitchen table and I think about that letter next to my name and what the others meant. N.W. Whether any of us ever stop being. But last month I found a hair tie on my front step that I didn't leave there. And a coffee mug moved from the left side of my sink to the right. Small things, probably nothing. I don't say it out loud. That's all I know to do.